gonna get started and
Hello everyone.
hey everyone. So we're gonna get started. So we're just having so I appreciate everyone coming to our event. You know, we had a really big turnout last time, and we're going to be doing these smaller gatherings in between our big gatherings. So it's really great to have everyone here, and I appreciate everyone coming out here. So we're going to be focused on you know, the cultivation, the growing, and things like that. And we have 3 speakers here. So I just want you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit and what you do and what your background is. So Nicole, you can start, and she's our chair as well for the New York City.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Nicole Chai. I'm the chair of the New York City Committee. I'm the founder of Nahi LLC and co-owner of Alpha and Omega Growers. Bossy Buds, another one of my brands. I grow hemp in New York State. I have multiple farms, and I grow hemp with the Amish. A little bit about me: I love community gardens, I love farming, I love playing in the dirt and doing paperwork.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Banton, and I met this young lady here at an event in Harlem. I don't know if you guys know Phil Edison. Met her at an event there. Tariq definitely knows him. He was on the panel. I'm also a grower. I've been growing for 5 years. I started growing, I was telling this gentleman over here, I started growing when my brothers went away to school. They picked up smoking, they were on a half scholarship, started smoking. Asked them, what the hell are you guys smoking? Some Gorilla Glue, strawberry, Kush, whatever. What is that? I don't know, it's fire though. They were rolling up, throwing away seeds. Yo, give me them seeds. Started growing, first couple of ones are horrible. After, keep doing it, perfected it, or almost perfected it, but people love what it is that grow. And my biggest thing was, it's not just about smoking weed, it's more so about health and wellness. So what other aspects of cannabis are there? So I make infused bath bombs, I do topical rubs, I do tinctures, so anything pertaining to health and wellness, I'm able to create for that. And I created a brand, Can It Feel Good. This young lady also helped me with my LLC to create a whole license and brand from it. So that's amazing. And my biggest thing is, in community gardens, how is it that we can now teach education around cannabis? That it's no longer just about something on the hush-hush that we should be secret about, or it's just about wake and bake, but more so, how is it healing people and allowing people to be able to have better lives? So that's my biggest thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Jack from the United States Flower Company, craft cultivators. I grew up in greenhouses. My whole family works in commercial horticulture, or did growing up, so I would go with my mom in the morning to work and play in the greenhouses till my bus came, picked me up from the greenhouse, come back to the greenhouse. My family helped found one of the largest CSAs called Hamlet Organic Garden out of Brookhaven in New York. So after work, then we went to the farm and helped kind of establish that and build it into a big, what it is today. It's completely different. It's huge now, but yeah, I'm a legacy grower. Big focus on organics, living soil. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah.
All right.
For sure.
So we have a few. So basically, we had we created some questions that we had asked the community or our organization what they would want to know about it. We are recording this, so it's not just going to be available to the people in here, but to everybody, and we're going to post it on YouTube afterwards. So these are just some of the questions. So I'm going to ask the question, and then you guys can kind of like answer. We have like 12 questions, but you know, we'll see how much we can get through. So the first question is, if you're moving from legacy to legal, what are your top concerns?
I could take a stab at that. Just speaking to people who are in legacy, I think the biggest concern is there's a form of PTSD where they're looking over their back, or they feel as though who is it that they can actually trust within this industry, because everyone's looking to make money. People are coming from the other side, coming over, seeing how can they establish a license here. So for them, it's just more so trusting people, partnerships, and not to have relationships with predatory people, because it's people looking to say, how can we get New York residents to partner with us, because we're already doing it on the West Coast. But it's more essential to have New York weed by New Yorkers. That's my biggest thing.
I can take a stab at that. Well, for me, what I'm getting is, why should I go legal? I make a lot of money doing it this way. I don't want to pay taxes, Nicole. You sit there and do all that paperwork, you know. And I tell them, well, you know, it's no longer a misdemeanor. You know, you get caught breaking the law, it's going to be a felony. You're going to get numbers like football, you know, 44, 56, and it's going to be months, you know. So that's the difference, you know, and going legal or, you know, staying in the illicit market, you know. I think everyone at some point, you know, was a part of the illicit market, but, you know, if you can go legal and do it the right way, what the fuck is some taxes? You're going to make some, excuse me, I don't mean to be cursing, I'm sorry. But, you know, this is the stuff that I, you know, think about. You're going to have to pay taxes, yes. They're highly taxing it, yes. But the other thing is that we want to make sure that the money goes in our community. And the tax money is not just going, you know, to grease the palms of other people that, you know, don't deserve the money. The money needs to go back into New York City to make New York City better, to boost our commodity, stop with all this crime, you know, educate our kids with STEM so they can be prepared for next level things, you know, as far as education. You know, knowledge is power for me. I'm someone that believes in, you know, knowledge. So for me, I tell them, you know, even if you don't want to go legal, educate yourself on the law and what the law says. So if you do get caught up in, you know, not wanting to go legal, you understand what your rights are and what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, my biggest thing would be the mentality shift. The black market, it's hidden, and you protect yourself by keeping quiet and not going out and looking for new connections. But if we want to be a community of New York agriculture, it's going to depend on connections of all of us. So be outgoing with it. Try and shift your mentality to looking for those connections, because we can now.
Yeah.
We can. And
Yeah.
taxes suck, but no taxes, no mortgage. You pay taxes on the money you make, and it's legal money that you can go get loans, you can build a life on.
I've definitely been talking to a lot of people, and a lot of the people are just even scared to admit that they have a legacy brand. You know, that I met a few women on the Rebel event, and we were talking, and they're like, they didn't even want to say that they had products, that they sold stuff. So that hesitation, and they're like, you know, it's fine. It's totally, you know, like it's that hesitancy is really kind of keeping it separate. And so I totally agree. Okay. No, it's okay. So the next question is, how much land do you need to qualify for a cultivator's license? And if you don't have land, can you still grow legally and professionally? Yeah. So, and I guess that's probably also like the qualifications for the canopy size. I don't know if you guys are aware of the canopy size that they put on the regulations. You know, so you can talk to that.
I need to get some water.
Okay.
I'm
No,
sorry.
it's okay.
Excuse me. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I meant to grab it before. Okay, so with the canopy size, OCM gave 3 choices. Outdoor, 43,562 thousand square feet. Greenhouse, 25,000 square feet. A mixture, no more than 30,000 square feet. 20,000 of greenhouse canopy, 10,000 of outdoor. That's what the law says you can do with the condition. Now, I think what has happened, you know, with this confusion with canopy size, I think that OCM understood the 1 acre to be as 1 acre, which 1 acre is 1 acre, the numbers don't lie. But I think that subtracting the row space caused the problem, because 1 acre of canopy, flower canopy, does not include the walkway. You have to have walkway space. So you have to have someone like Manson that's good at math, or, you know, someone that's good at physics, or, you know, you don't have, like, but this is, you figure it out, you know. because in a certain amount of square feet, you can only fit a certain amount of plants, but you're going to need a certain amount of walkway, so you need to subtract that. So you can, have that only as canopy space and the walkway space be excluded, which will give you more flowering space, right?
Yeah.
So this is why, listen, I met with a group, I have a group of growers, and he was part of them. I mean, it's like 16 of us. We met for 3 months trying to figure out variations before the license came out, because we were also given, being part of the association, So if you're not a member, I suggest you join today. It's a mere $500. We eat that in the restaurant. We go to the mall and spend that. But I said that to say, being a part of the organization gave us extra information early as a grower. So we were able to see some of these numbers, and we can work them to be able to figure out what would be the best option as far as our canopy space. Because for me, it was, and that was the main thing I kept screaming, please guys help me, give me, because there's 1,000 different ways you could have done that. I just picked those off to you because I know them, I studied them, because it took some work to figure it out, but I didn't do it by myself. It was him and 12 other people. We had a Monday call every Monday at 7 o'clock. Some Mondays I missed, the people were there, but I mean, that's how we got to it and get to understand, the different ways you can do it, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That's it. Any other?
She encapsulated everything.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is, if you're prospectively looking for property for a legal adult use license, if there's a mortgage on the property, you have to call the bank and you have to find out if they're okay with, and you need to get it in writing that it's going to be okay. Like say you know someone with land and they're going to lease you land. First question should be, is there a mortgage on the land? If there's a mortgage on the landowner needs to call the bank, because most banks will pull your mortgage if they find out you're growing legal cannabis on. So there are a few farm banks that are okay with it. The banks are starting to warm up to things, but it should be, don't think that you'll get a good deal and you're going to rent some land somewhere without, the bank owns that land until the mortgage is paid off, so you need to know that. That would be my only, as far as I know, there isn't any, there is the square footage for the conditional adult use, but they haven't, the regs aren't out for the general.
Yeah, that square footage was conditional
This is
only.
all conditional.
Yeah, so
This is
and
what's out now. Yeah.
just to add to that, it's also a whole bunch of other licenses that you can get that will be coming available. Get the lease agreement, have it identify some things. If you do enhancements on the property, make sure because I lease my land. I have a bunch of parcels that I lease, and that would work for me. But I think on the long term that I would have to own my own land.
And it's doable, but you want, before you go and invest any money into a property, you want to know that the bank is okay with it, and it can't just be it's got to be in writing.
For sure.
Yeah, you also have to remember that banks are federally funded or federally insured.
Right.
So that's why they don't want to break it, because federally it's still illegal. So that's where the conflict comes in, and so they're going to shut it down right away if they learn about it. So that's the reason behind that. So.
No, I think she answered my question.
Yeah, okay. And then who do you use for nutrients and where do you get them?
For me, I'm like my guy here, natural. I do K&F. I love, fish amino acids, myceliums, things like that. I've used other nutrients before, but as far as the grow, I'm not really keen on, I don't have a specific nutrient that I would use. And maybe Dan could speak to that.
For me, I'm using fruits and vegetables. Compost, blending, and real fruit. That's the KNF that she's speaking about. That's the main nutrients that the plant actually needs. So we get that from our fruits and vegetables. So why not go to that source? Blend and grind them up, pour them into the soil, and go from there.
For me, I'm a mix. I mean, it's all completely organic, but I'm using living soil. The main ingredient there would be compost, mostly from vermicompost, which is earthworm poop. The best thing you can do is find yourself a quality source of earthworm castings, and that's everything the plant needs pre-digested. There are certain other things. If you're going to do it continuously with the soil, it gets into soil testing and amendments there, but there's a way of doing it. So I have maybe a handful of actual additional nutrients, fulvic acid. Really not too many. some compost teas, biologicals for pesticide, for IPM. But
You want to
that's really
speak more in that living soil? Or
Yeah, so the living soil, it's not new, but it's more of an idea than a specific recipe. And essentially, you're building up. Composting happens from raw nutrients being broken down by microbes, earthworms, and other living things in the soil that break down the macronutrients into same macronutrients that the plant are more easily able to uptake. So nitrogen is notoriously hard finding organic, water-soluble nitrogen, but being broken down in earthworm casings, it's water-soluble and it's in the soil. And if you can just feed the soil, you're actually feeding all of these colonies in the soil itself, as opposed to feeding the plant.
Yeah.
And all these, the byproducts of all these microbes, bacteria in the soil, they make what the plant needs. So it's,
So there's literally things living in the soil. That's why
yeah,
it's called
it's called
1,000%.
living soil because
Yeah.
it's a very biologically active soil. And it requires a lot of work to keep it alive. So it's not the easiest way of doing things, but the beauty of it is it kind of stays in stasis where if you're using salt fertilizers, most chemical nutrients are salt-based. You're going to start raising the salt level in the soil. And eventually, you need to flush that soil out to leach it of all of those extra salts. And that comes with a lot of waste, and it's something to deal with, and it's something the state, I believe, is going to be looking at big time.
especially
When
on,
you hear
on
about-
the eco.
Yeah, when you hear about these, I mean, coming from Long Island, we're everywhere is a watershed area, and we're very worried about what we've seen industrial agriculture do to the aquifer, to the bay, to the waterways, and a lot of it is nitrogen, ammonia runoff from big scale ag, and that's how that system works. You add these salts, you add them in abundance because the plant can't absorb most of them, and then you have to leach it all out. So this style of growing, there is no leaching out. I don't have any runoff ever from my soil. I keep it at constant moisture content and
Feed
Feed
it.
Yes, but I'm sorry, okay?
No, of course,
Uh,
everybody's open.
Thank you. With a large commercial grow, right, growing from a living soil is a lot more tricky than, say, cocoa or rock wool,
yes.
right? So how would you say in a large commercial grow, because you have to take into consideration, financial aspects of the grow.
Yeah, it's the hardest way to do, and one thing is we're designing it requires large planting sizes too. So you're making these either large pots and large beds of these ecosystems that are great habitats for microbes. They're also great habitats for other things.
Exactly.
Great habitats for bugs, for mold spores, and there are mold spores that you want, mold spores that you don't. So the great thing about certain hydroponic systems is that you can create them sterile. You can break them all down, you can wash the whole room down, and if you're growing in cocoa, it's an inert medium. You're not going to bring anything in. So it's a lot easier to keep bugs out. With living soil, you have to work a lot harder to keep them out, and they're going to get in. So it's more about a management level. Instead of pesticides, it's like integrated pest management. You're managing these pests that gets into an acceptable level. Because you can't you're building up this soil over time, and it's expensive to build up. You can, but it's not very financially viable to just throw all the soil out and start over again every time there's the first bug. So there's a way of doing it. It's not the easiest way. It's harder, and there's a lot more thinking involved with what are you going to do if you get a bug in one bed, in a bed that maybe weighs 500 pounds. You have a way of getting that out outside of shoveling it out of the bucket.
So if you were to scale, right, in a legal market, would you continue growing living soil?
No, but it would be more so. I feel that this is only a personal opinion,
Sure.
but I feel that at a certain point you can't scale the quality that I'm looking for past a certain point. You start getting 20,000, 30,000 square feet of canopy. It's really hard to maintain that level of quality above that. People do it, but it's exponentially harder to do that. So I wouldn't say There's a couple of companies doing it. There's a couple in Canada that are scaling organic living soil, 100, 200,000 square feet of canopy. They're outliers, so I wouldn't recommend it. This would be more for a craft, small.
Artist.
Yes.
Or micro.
Micro,
businesses
yes.
that are happening.
And there's also a lot of testing that goes on with that. So as you're adding more and more individual beds of soil, there's just more and more testing. Can that be scaled up? Yes. But it does get harder.
So this kind of leads to our next question. How do you battle pests and mites? Predators versus pesticides. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, like managing. It's just all about managing them. Knowing what pests are in the environment is where I started. On my farm, just simple and silly, but it was like a little net to catch them. Just to see who they are. You know what I mean?
Identification is key.
Huh?
Yeah.
Identification is key.
Yeah, you have to know.
Before you do anything,
Absolutely.
identify.
You have to.
And there's we're very lucky. We have Cornell University in New York, and in every single county, they operate a county extension agency. And if you don't know, Cornell is one of the best ag schools in the entire world. And in each county, they have a lab where you can bring soil, you can bring pests for identification. You can just, if you see a bug on a leaf, you can bring it down to them, and they will tell you what it is.
Yeah. Where it
Best
comes
thing.
from, everything.
And they will give you recommendations, and you don't have to tell them that you're growing tomatoes.
Absolutely.
You can tell them exactly. You can tell them what you're growing. The more info you give them, the better. You can tell them. If you're really worried, you can tell them you're growing hemp. But I'll tell you, they don't care. They don't care at all. They're happy to have you, and that's their job. When they see a new bug, they get excited.
Yeah. Absolutely.
More on that question. Clones.
Clones.
You're going to be tempted to bring in clones. Have a quarantine strategy. Most bugs come in from clones. Most real bad bugs that you've never encountered before come in for clones. We have aphids here, but you're going to see a huge industry pop up around commercial clones, and they're going to bring in bugs. They're going to bring bugs. And they're going to bring in hop latent viroid, and that's something to look into if you haven't yet, because it's a silent killer that will shut you down.
Yeah.
When you won't know, there's no symptoms until it's too late. So have a strategy when you bring in clones. You can look it up. There's tons of ways of doing it, but have the idea that if you're going to bring in new material, even if quarantine, treat before it ever enters anywhere near your grow, because some of these bugs, they will.
Your whole harvest. Everything.
Yeah.
Can you discuss tissue culture?
Yeah, so tissue culture is a new method of propagating plants. It's not that new. It's been in orchids for a very long time, but it's new to the cannabis industry. And tissue culture, you're essentially taking a small part of the plant, growing in a petri dish. And well, by doing that, it's an extremely sterile environment, so there's absolutely no bugs. It can transfer certain viruses that way, but there are ways of treating it long term that can guarantee that there are no viroids or viruses in the tissue culture itself. So there's an industry growing around some of these clone growers where the mother plants themselves, they're taking tissue culture, growing these plants. There are also tissue culture where you can get all of your clones from it. It's a little bit more money. But it's probably the way the industry is going with how bad some of these new viruses and bug issues are popping up. And it's also a way of storing genetics. If you've got a cut, if you've got a rare cut, and if you just want to keep it to know if anything ever happens, if you have an infestation, you can send it to tissue culture, and they can kind of keep it on ice for you. Or if you find out through testing that your cut that hasn't been performing so well the last couple of runs has got hop latent, it's one of the only ways to remediate it without getting rid of the cut, without just throwing it out.
Yeah, thank you. Another question was, I don't know, you guys all have your own site, but how much do you need to start a cultivation site? Small grow, let's say craft, something like a micro, like a craft, like we're saying, let's starting base, what's the minimum? That's what the question
Numbers.
I would say in a hoop house, I mean, just to build a hoop house is a simple one. It's probably about, 415 by 48, which is half of a 30 by 96. About 55, maybe 6,000 if you want to go high tech. You can spend up to 40 to 50 grand. Just depending on what you want to do or what you want to do. You can collect that.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways to go with this. I don't have very many numbers for outdoor. Because I haven't looked for it, but the biggest thing is, are you going to be supplemental lighting? New York has put out in some of their draft regs a minimum efficacy for lighting, which is a ratio of how much light a light puts out to how much electricity it uses. The plant needs a certain amount of light. HPS lights, which have been the standard for a long time, the best ones have a number of 1.7, and I believe the state made it 1.8. It's the minimum efficacy they're looking at. So they're kind of, unless a company comes out with a 1.8 light, they're kind of forced to use LED lights. You're looking at, on the cheap side, let's say you want to do a 1,000 square foot flower area. It's about 25 lights. Low end, $700 a light. Up end, $1,000, $1,500 a light. It adds up quick. And then you have to cool all of those. So HVAC at scale is a very expensive cost that a lot of people don't look at. There's 1,000. I can go down a lot of different roads.
It's okay. I know it's a difficult question to answer. So
more than you think would be the answer. And not just a little bit more than you think, a lot more.
Right.
It's always more than you think.
There's a lot of things have to be factored in as far as tracking. I'm not sure. There's testing and all that stuff, and
The actual land too. I mean, just
and the
leasing.
The leases are going to be, depending on what you want to do. There's still not too much info on New York, but I have some insight in New Jersey, and it's crazy. Take the base rent that you would look for a warehouse at 5 to 10x it, and hope that the landlord isn't trying to weasel his way in on a split on your profits. Because that's common. There are real estate conglomerates buying up all the warehouses in certain townships that are allowing this in the green zones. Luckily in New York, it looks like we're not going to have any green zones. They're very clear that we can't do selective zoning. But if you're in an area where there's only so many warehouses, it can happen. So
okay, leading to our next question, how can you grow in New York City? Not outside, or do you suggest purchasing land outside of New York City? Let's say for maybe the future of indoor growing, maybe things like that, so, or rooftop.
I'd say indoor, you're going to struggle with power. You're going to struggle with, if you can't find an existing facility that has a significant electricity and gas infrastructure already approved from the city. The utility in the city, I'm not going to say they're maxed out, but they're not keen to add any more capacity. It's very hard to add capacity on their end. So getting a big gas line to run a chiller, or getting, 100 kilowatt power to a warehouse that doesn't existing have it. If you can get them to do it, you're looking at years out. So keep that in mind. It's for full indoor, because the power requirements for a full indoor facility are huge.
Absolutely.
Huge. So greenhouses on roof, very cool idea if they'll let it happen.
Yeah.
But there still are requirements there. There's still, it's not warm here in the winter. If you plan on heating that by steam or by gas, if the infrastructure isn't there to meet that capacity, it's very hard to edit. It's very costly. Unless you're okay with just growing in the summer, no problem. But there's a lot of missing money there.
Okay. Any other questions?
No,
You're good.
no, it's like when you know.
So next question, should I grow on single tier or multi-tiers, vertical cultivation using more than one level, or racks, shelves? Which one is better? It's a preference, I guess, for growing.
I would think you would want to do vertical, you know, because you get the maximum, but, you know, it just depends on what you can afford to do, because a vertical is quite costly, like you said, it's very expensive, you know, and, you know, sometimes if everything is not factored in, you can, like, you know, lose sight of what, you know, your goals, and I'm like with the craft flower and, you know, boutique kind of flower, you know, smaller, better, it's neat. You know, that's the aim that I'm looking for as well.
I think some of those are catered to indoor growing when it goes to racks and things of that sort. And as the gentleman was saying, a lot of stuff is going to be about sustainability. New York is going to be big on sustainability. How is it that you're preserving as best as possible? So I think the vertical grow may probably be best. Or even to the last point you made, a lot of people are going to be doing autos to be able to do multiple harvests throughout the summer, possibly, if they're not able to do the rooftop greenhouses or indoor grows at those moments.
Yeah, I'd say vertical makes sense if you are going to grow in the city, because your cost per square foot is going to be so high. But we do have some buildings here that have tall ceilings, and you pay per square foot, not by cubic foot. So if you can go up 2 levels, you can triple your square footage. Maybe not triple because you do some of the racks, but at least double your flowering square footage. But that again comes into, you have to add lights for every one of those. So if you're doubling your square footage, you're doubling your lighting, you're doubling now your HVAC. A building that might have had the utility capabilities might not have that after the fact, but it's a balance. Your square footage, I mean, in New York City, your square footage for grow operation is going to be super high. So if it makes sense for you if the cost is worth it, yeah, vertical is, and the technology and the industry, it's not a hodgepodge anymore. They have it dialed, so you can reach out to some of these companies and they can just call them, you pay the money, they got you set up, and you've got double the flowering area for the building you have now.
Are there any eco-friendly processes that growers should consider? Aside from, I guess, the living soil that we were talking about, any other sustainability, issues that could come into play, especially with New York being so focused on that?
The way things are transported and like how you get, for us licensed conditional, we have to come up with the waste management plan, and on how we would, not just the water waste, but waste in general, and when we get different supplies.
Also, too, being that the first set of plants are going to be going into the ground, how to then regenerate that soil. So hemp is a great way of doing so, to pull all those toxins that are in the soil and regenerate them for whatever cover crop. Yeah. So whatever next harvest that you're going into will be then sufficient for whatever your harvest may be.
For me, I'm growing with lighting, so the biggest thing is your carbon footprint would be the utilities and the energy required to light and maintain that environment, and whatever you can do to lower that. LEDs are great, but some of the HVAC systems, it's probably not an option in the city, but in the surrounding areas, geothermal, instead of burning propane the whole winter. We sit on an aquifer that sits at 59 degrees year round, so you can. It's a large upfront cost, but the payback on it's like LEDs, the large upfront capital expenditure, but the payback is very quickly, and we're going to see a plateau in prices. We're gonna get this big ramp up, and then it's gonna slowly, maybe not that slowly, fall off. And in a couple of years from now, when you've already made the capex expenses and your cost of production is a lot lower, you'll see the people that are running the more expensive, cheaper options aren't going to be able to produce profitably. All across the country, HPS lights are falling off because it's just unsustainable to grow that way with that kind of expense. It's a material cost to grow the product. So at $1,000 a pound, it doesn't really make sense to spend $400 a pound growing it just in electricity.
All right, so we have 2 more questions. So what irrigation methods are you utilizing right now for outdoor growth? Well, I guess
Well,
outdoor and
Well, I use headers underwater, just depending on. But this first go, it would just be straight in the ground, and I would have some irrigation, but I don't know that I would use plastic to keep the weeds out. I think I would just use because they're going to be oils for me.
My grow right now is small, so I'm still hand watering.
yeah.
It's not that much
What are you
at the moment.
planning to do when you
Well,
eventually
it would be headers,
headers?
1,000%.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're on a craft scale. There are still people that recommend doing hand watering if you can get away with it. I've got hand watering and for living soil, blue mats. They're a non-electrical drip irrigation system that just maintains a solid moisture level. And there's all this the new crop steering stuff with cocoa and with hydroponics, rock wool, drybacks, and getting these big drybacks. It works great for that medium, but all of the living populations in the soil, they don't like that. We're trying to replicate a healthy soil from outdoors that doesn't have those sort of dryback cycles. It stays maintains a medium amount of moisture. So maintaining that as best you can with these automated watering systems helps just helps the microbes in all the living soil thrive. So anything you can do to help that out, extremely beneficial. In my grow style. It's not for everyone. It's got its drawbacks.
And last question, are you using a hydroponic, aeroponic system or soil-based medium?
I'm gonna. I think I would do a little bit of all three, but I would probably use soil mostly because I like to feed the soil as well. But I would try cocoa. I would do a mix. I would do a hydro. Just to test some different things. And
I'm doing soil. I'm dibbling that a little bit with the hydroponics just to see how that is. But soil is, I've had much success with soil. I think I'm sticking with soil.
I'm sticking with soil. I believe in it. But we're all members here. I wouldn't overwhelmingly recommend it to everyone. There's a learning curve. There's a big learning curve. And there's much less of a learning curve for certain other grow styles that do produce really well. They'll probably yield more if you can set up a nice hydroponic setup with cocoa or rock wool and go on an Athena schedule. You're probably going to do pretty good.
I agree. It's easier nowadays. Like technology's taking over.
Yeah. There's a lot of tech and there's a lot of
forget it, right?
and there's not buying 50 different bottles of things.
Exactly.
There's some of these companies now just have a
One and done.
it's
Right.
like a 3 and done.
Yeah,
2 or 3 are done.
two-part.
But it's much easier than it's much easier. The learning curve is smaller. So
Yeah.
as friends, as members, I'll also recommend.
This is Grow King, everybody.
Sorry.
We'll get you in the camera.
Sorry. Blessings, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Oh man, it was trouble getting in. Yes.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we're just gonna open up, anybody have any questions or Q&A or anything like that, you can ask.
Does elevation affect,
Yes, it does.
Like if you're growing weed in the mountains and then you're growing it by the beach?
I like to say everything. I like to start everything off with, in my opinion.
Right.
Yes. I've smoked marijuana from California, Pennsylvania, and it's not the same when I get here. And I've smoked it there, and it was great. When I come to New York, I smoke it. It's different. It completely changes. So elevation does affect things, in my opinion.
In growing and
in growing too, especially in growing, because first of all, elevations you get less oxygen at higher levels, or so it does affect the plant just like it affects the human body.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. The plant is exactly like the human body, in my opinion.
So what is the elevational sweet spot?
Oh, I would never be able. And on top of that too, everything takes time and everything gets acclimated. So we live in here at this elevation. Once we start living at that same elevation, we're gonna acclimate to that elevation. We're gonna get used to it. You know, that type of way. So same thing with the plant.
Would you argue that wherever the strain originated from in whatever part of the world will probably be the best elevation for it? So
In my
like near
opinion, yeah.
sea level, or like for another, you know, from another continent, will be like towards the mountains or something like
Yes,
that?
I agree. But I've gotten strains from other places, and maybe after the third time, maybe almost a year of me growing it here and not hitting the button, at the end of the year, I end up hitting the button.
Right.
You know, people always be like, hey, you grew it better than I did, or it's just as good. And it's really just over time. It's not an overnight thing. It's not just take a clone and it's going to grow the same that it grew in California. It's never going to be the same.
Right.
Yes,
The biggest thing is environment.
very big one.
Here, northeast coast, humidity is a big thing for us. It's dry. So when you grow in another region, it's not going to be the same thing here. Some people compare it to like champagne, wine. There's each region specific.
Yes.
Same thing with the
Even like
cannabis.
pizza.
It's each region
Yeah.
specific.
New York water, the pizza hit it, yo.
I know people in Florida that take New York water and ship it
Yeah,
to
word.
Florida to make their dough. I'm
Yeah.
serious,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, word to it.
It gets like that.
Philadelphia
Yeah,
too. Philly also.
definitely, exactly.
And some of those, like as we were
Bagels.
talking about, you're not going to find too many pure land races left that are going to be commercially viable.
Yeah.
There's very few, so everything's a hybrid at this point.
Yes.
So you're not
Back
going
to that New York sour, yo.
Where's it at though? Where's it at?
NYPD killed it. They
I'll-
took it from everybody.
I've tried them all. I've been doing a lot of research. I've been looking, and I'll smoke stuff that they say they're sour, and it's supposed to be from some of the best breeders. And to me, it still is not that New York sour. I miss it.
not New York sour.
I got some sour D from Zach. I got the Zach cut, you
That's
know.
I'm digging through seeds. I still can't find it, but
But tell me this, why is it that people have such a difficulty? Now I hear you two talking like, hey, just set it and forget it, you know, get the Athena, whatever, you know, whatever it is. But the question is, we all here know that there are qualities, there's levels to this thing, right?
Yeah.
You can't just set it and forget it and get high quality bud,
Right.
right? So what is the differentiator between, you might say genetics, when you give two people the same genetics, you're never gonna get the same plant. Right, what's the differentiator that takes it from that 85% or from that corporate bud to craft bud? What's that?
anyone want to answer that? I got an answer too, but I don't want to keep running them out.
a couple things.
Yeah.
Consistency in environment, consistency in care. That's a part of we spoke about at a certain scale, you can't keep the quality up because keeping consistency across 30,000, 100,000 square feet is almost impossible. But also there's some of it's subjective, and in my opinion, there's a difference between organics and salt-based fertilizers. I won't say that that's the difference between the 80 and the 100, but for me it's a part. In my opinion, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is not because I enjoy doing things the hard way. It's because that I believe that it's a better product.
So, and what by better, you mean with a better terpene profile?
I mean, the test results are now coming back that the terpene profiles are better in living soils. Subjectively, the taste and the cleaner burn, that's still up for debate because it's hard to do a scientific test on something that's a subjective human experience.
Right. And I could agree with that too. And even still, I love a living soil too, but for me, that would be my personal consumption. I can't do living soil in a facility we're trying to like make money from. I can't do a living soil in a facility we're trying to supply the demand, you know, and I completely understand the logistics of growing marijuana for its best properties, but when it comes to the demand, you know, I'm not saying we're cutting any corners by doing it hydrophonically either, but it's just a quicker way. It's the quickest and quicker way to get the medicine out to the people.
Clean too.
Clean, yeah, of course, definitely. It's always going to be clean, regardless if it's hydro or soil. It's going to be clean.
But I mean clean by the process, right? So if I'm working in a facility, we're putting in a facility now, it's 56,000 square feet.
Yes.
You can't go with living soil, it would be a mess. You
Yeah.
know? I mean, every time we couldn't
Not necessarily
we couldn't
either.
clean the soil necessarily.
No,
right?
not necessarily, because it will not really be a mess. You can have them in beds to where you will grow a crop and you will harvest that crop, and you would grow the crop in the same bed. There's no cleaning whatsoever. It's just like the earth. Exactly.
Right.
So.
All right, so we have a facility, I'm not gonna get too far into it.
Yeah,
We have a facility in Oregon, it's called Tumor Industries.
Yes.
Right, and they do live in soil.
Yes.
They have to limit the size of their facility, right? Because past a certain point, it's the soil aspect of it makes it more difficult to control. This is from their perspective. Now, when we're doing like cocoa or rock wool, it's pretty much, I mean, that's more of a set it and forget it almost type thing.
Yeah.
You can really dial that thing in.
Yes.
You know, and with these new technologies, right, you can really get down to a very granular aspect of what you dial in, you know, so.
I've also seen it done though with soil, where they just control the light. It's majority of it is lighting. It has nothing to do with soil, nothing to do with the nutrients in soil. What it does, though, let me not say that, it sounds crazy. It does have that to do with it, but don't get me wrong. Everything like is regenerative. So because you think that you deplete, you'll never take everything out of the earth. That's why these trees grow yearly for hundreds and hundreds of years without you doing anything. You don't even gotta pee. Your dog don't gotta pee on this on nothing. Like seriously, like it will grow itself, because even if the first 100 cubic feet of earth is depleted of its nutrients, there's hundreds and thousands of cubic feet. So these roots continue to grow. As above, so above as below. As above, so below. Thank you. Ooh, wow. Take the camera. But yeah, exactly the same thing. Like, so if you got a 10-foot tree, don't think the roots ain't 10 foot into the ground. They are.
That's the issue when you talk about a pot. You know, I mean, you can't go any deeper in the pot.
Yeah, no, it's got to be like a living bed. It's got to be like an abundance. It cannot really, in my opinion, it cannot be a pot. And if it is a pot, it's got to be 10 gallons, and that's for one harvest. That's for one run.
Right.
You will not have anything, or you have to re-amend it. You have to give back.
Right.
There are ways. It's hard, but there are ways to move those beds around. You know, I'm looking at complete rolling beds, sliding everything over to one side of the room to sanitize one side of the room, sanitize the other. But again, it comes back to these beds are a petri dish. So
How
it's,
much
you
is
know,
the facility, if you want me to ask you?
5,000 square feet.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that's a sweet spot, but it's
good for craft.
It's good for craft, and it's
Yeah.
about above where it starts getting a little bit difficult to manage.
How many people do you have working?
Huh?
How many people do you have working?
Oh, so this is all. I'm not one of the conditional. This is all future,
Okay.
but it's all rolling now.
I did.
So I know that the legal, what we're fighting against is just the bud itself. But like, there's more to the plant too, right? And so you could use it for fuel and for building structures and stuff like that. So isn't that clothing, of course, isn't that, so when you harvest, isn't that also part of the profit that you can make? Or is there no market for it? Nobody's buying up the other stuff that could make the byproducts and all these other things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Not
that
so much the clothing and stuff, because there's a delineation of like the hemp and cannabis. A lot of the building materials, it's all actual industrial hemp. The
Right.
fibers are different.
Right.
But yeah, there's no shortage of things you can do with your byproducts.
Down to the roots.
So you can
They
actually
make saws.
build a grow house from hemp, if you know, they're ready to
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And then be like, oh, this is made from that stuff, you know.
Yes.
This was my first harvest. That the buds was trash, but I made a wall from it or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
steps.
it's concrete.
They are making
hempcrete.
hemp blocks.
Hempcrete.
Right, hemp like hempcrete. It's
Yeah,
like a
hempcrete.
mixture of
Right.
hemp and lime, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's like biodegradable. It's insulated and other things like that. So
You can make salves. You can make so much from the roots. You can
Right.
boil them. There's so much things you can do.
So it's not, so you have something that has 5 or 6 uses.
That
even
plant
after just
itself-
harvesting the plant for just for
Because people
personal
are using
use.
it for cooking, people are using
Right.
it for
Everything.
Right.
topical salves, as you
Yeah.
said.
You can
Right.
take. Yep.
And all
you
from,
can soak it.
all from you still growing the Zaza.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
For
so
me,
you
nothing
use the whole
goes to waste.
buffalo. You use the whole
Nothing goes to
buffalo.
waste.
Yeah, you
Nothing
can use the
goes-
stems.
Right.
A lot of people like buds and flowers, but you can use the stems and still do teas, and
Yep.
you
Right.
can still get medicinal benefits from those things.
And are stems something you would package and be like,
oh
yo, this is stem?
no, because the THC.
Or is that like just your personal?
If anything, people use it for
teas.
teas. As he said, people use them for teas.
Right, it's really minimal though, the percentage, you know.
So that's not
it's
something
almost
you
like
would
a
spend money
skin.
on marketing that or packaging that or, you
It
know.
will be
But
compiled.
you can though, you can. There are multiple people that do different things with these things.
Right.
So for us,
Right.
being growers and being profitable, you know,
It's
like
the bud.
trying,
Yeah, because I
you
got
know, yeah, it's the bud.
I got a truck and I got people who come up and be like, yo, you got any teas? And I'm like, my boy's like, yo, bro, we should just break the stems when we back up and just give
Yes,
him the stems
you
and be
can,
like,
yes.
yo, $5, here you go, whatever. Like,
Right.
he'll feel it.
It will be a small percent on the THC level.
Right.
But still,
But that's what they're looking for. They're looking for like, you know, or something, you know, they just
every part of the plant can be used.
Right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
And so I was just wondering because y'all could grow in it, so there should be some people want to just.
You know how much stems I throw away though? You
Exactly.
Know how much,
So,
you know how much roots I throw away?
Right.
I don't have the time for it though.
Right,
You need
right.
you need different equipment for different things.
Right.
For me to
Package that.
process it, the roots, it's a lot of work. You gotta wash them, get everything off them.
Right,
I'm not profiting from that. Nobody in New York is smoking roots. Nobody in New York is making tea from roots in general.
Right.
But as time goes on and people start to know, like,
There's a
oh,
potential
I don't have to
for
throw
it.
this
There's a
away.
market.
Yeah.
There's a market for
future,
everything.
but of course.
Right. It's depending on what aspect of the industry we want to go into.
Right.
Definitely.
And back to like my recommendation for fertilizer, the first thing you should look for in like a living soil is really good earthworm casings.
Earthworms, yeah.
Get yourself an
Love
earthworm bin.
earthworms. Even
And
in
every-
hydro, brother. Even in hydro. Cocoa, I would throw like a
the
handful of
perfect-
earthworm castings.
It is the absolute perfect.
It's the best.
nutrient. So you can set up an
It's the best, and it also does a lot of Sorry not to cut you off, because you're right there with it. I love that where you at with it. But it has the it has the all the good bugs that we need. All the microbes. Thank you, the microbes. Oh man, stoning. It has the microbes, and that's the best thing. I swear that's the best thing in the world. I've even ran deep water culture with straight water, and I've had root rot problems, and I've tried all this H2O, hydrogen peroxide, wasting my time. I took earthworm castings, ran water through it with a bubbled it over 24 hours. I poured that water inside of my hydro deep water culture, bro, within days. You talking about white roots? I never would ever use hydrogen, no H2O2, none of that crap. I love earthworm
Crazy
castings.
how the earth is provided, right?
And it
Love
just
it.
comes full circle, and then you can set up a big, at almost any scale, an earthworm bin, where you just have a bin outside and that does composting. And instead of just regular bacterial microbial composting, these earthworms are eating everything you throw in there.
Yes. And cleaning and shitting it out. Right, exactly. Recycling it, taking out all the bad stuff, and giving you all the good stuff.
And it's like a closed loop system because you're taking those nutrients out of the soil, they're coming up in the stem, now you're taking that out of the bed, but you put it out to compost, and then that's what's going to feed the bed
Right
again.
back, exactly. Yep. Even the leaves itself, as they die, don't throw them away. Put them in the bed. Mix them up. Right there in the bed. I wouldn't even compost it and have it go through that. I would compost it right inside the soil itself, because you're taking the nitrogen out of all the leaves, anything that's green that falls on the floor, it still has nitrogen in it. And then the earth is going to end up breaking down the nutrients, the microbes, everything's going to end up breaking down and reusing. So you don't have to keep feeding. You don't have to keep giving salts. You don't have to keep giving earthworm castings in general. It's just going to regenerate itself, and that's what I love about a bed. But there's drawbacks when it comes into commercial. We can do that for home, no worries. But when it comes to commercial and you have to turn and burn, you can't really sit back and wait. You can't wait 6 months. You can't wait 3 weeks. You can't. It's got to go right now. And that's the problem. You know, and a lot of people don't understand that, and they're like, oh, I don't want hydro, I want soil. We all do. But when it comes to the supply and the demand, it's basically the hydro way. It's the easier, cleaner, in my opinion, less of a because even nutrient-filled soils they can have their ups and downs. They can lose out calciums, they can lose out nitrogens, and unless you're taking those samples, the soil, and getting it tested, you're not gonna know what's missing. So if you start a grow, it can start off fine, and then a month or two down the line, you're gonna run into problems. So it's a little tricky,
And it's a
but
lot harder to react on the soil side. Like on a hydro side, your
Overnight.
nitrogen's a little low, you bump the
Overnight.
nitrogen. In soil, your nitrogen goes low, it's
Days.
a slow release, so you have to,
oops. Yep.
you don't even want to think about trying to have to fix deficiencies. You need to be
Yes,
planning
yes.
ahead to make sure that
Oh,
deficiencies
yes.
don't happen, because they take time, and that time is, it's like everything, time is money.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
real money when a plant that's in its prime is missing out on a certain macronutrient. You know, week 7 flower, when you really need it to matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can make a big
Big
difference.
difference,
And that
right?
comes back to the consistency, like
Yes.
getting to that, from that 80 to 100, like is your environment, are your nutrients, are everything perfect the whole time?
I agree.
Alright, so I think we're just wrapping it up. We've been talking for more than an hour, so you guys are gonna.
I'm late.
But
I feel like
no,
I
it's
wanna
okay.
go.
It's
You know?
okay. But we're still gonna hang out. I think
Just
we're gonna
message.
just chill down and everything like
I
that.
know
But
the
I
guy
appreciate
who owns-
everybody coming. Really appreciate all your, your speaking and everything like that.
Yes.
And we're gonna be posting this on YouTube, so that'll be great. But thank you for coming.
Thank you, folks.